Hello, this is my final project for my psychology class. For all intents and purposes, this will be me as the narrator. I was interested and wanted to study something related to our short-term and long-term memory. Zooming out a bit, you'll notice that nothing can go into your long-term memory before it goes into your short-term memory. Likewise, nothing can go into your short-term memory before it reaches your attention. You guys might remember this attention video we watched in class, or have seen this football counting one, which was shown on Brain Games, which was a TV show at one point. Both of these use our limited amount of attention against us, where, in the first one, a gorilla walks across the screen, and on Mind Games 1, the answer is displayed right there on the screen. Another subtle thing that may not be that apparent that takes away our attention span is font style. Font styles range from easy to read to hard to read, with fonts such as Arial, Times New Roman, and Futura ranking on the lower end of difficulty, while fonts such as Heitenschweiler, Monotype Corvosa, and Comic Sans rank at the top of the difficulty. While these harder font styles aren't impossible to read, they will give you a challenge. As with Heitenschweiler, the font is thicker, making some letters like A's and E's hard to discern. At a glance, E's can look like 8's or A's, and I's are so tall you might think that they are L's. Another issue for readers is the spacing and unevenness, which can be seen with Comic Sans. When contrasted with Futura to the left, they both have pretty large spacing, the only difference being how uniform they are in text and style. With a small amount of words, it's relatively okay, but when the page begins to get filled up, it can be very confusing seeing these harder to read fonts on top of each other. So, how is counting passes and reading related? Well, they are inversely related, simply in how much overall mental work they require. Counting the number of balls going across our screen isn't something you would normally do, while on the other side, you read every day, and sometimes not even intentionally. Since reading is something we can casually do without much effort, our brain doesn't allocate a ton of focus. This means that for the easier to read column, our brain isn't paying nearly as much attention towards what we are reading and actively trying to remember as it is in the presence of much harder to read fonts. The harder to read fonts cause your brain to pause and pull in more cognitive resources to discern and understand what is written. This can lead to improved cognition and understanding, which can also affect the short-term and long-term memory. To test this, I set up a small and somewhat controlled experiment for my friends. I made 5 separate sentences which all followed the same lines of reasoning. They had similar verbs, nouns, presence of multiple descriptors, and at least 2 subjects of interest. I then chose 5 different fonts for the sentences. 2 easy ones, Calibri and Times New Roman, then 3 harder ones, Comic Sans, Heitenschweiler, and Monotype Corsiva. Then, each of the fonts were assigned a letter. Likewise, each of the sentences were given a number. I then matched 5 different font styles to each of the stories, resulting in a list that looks like this. I then handed out each story in rotating order, so participant 1 would get 1A, 2B, 3C, and so on, looking like this. They then read these stories one at a time and answered questions after waiting an increased time interval, which went from 1 minute for story 1, 5 for story 2, 10 for story 3, and 20 minutes for story 4, and then an entire hour for story 5. Unsurprisingly, with only a 1-minute offset before questioning, everyone was able to get the correct answers. The same could be said for the 5-minute offset where, once again, everyone got the correct answers. From the third story with a 10-minute offset, we had our first wrong answer from participant 5 who had the Times New Roman font. Story 4 is where it gets interesting, as 2 of the participants missed at least 1 question, with 1 of them missing 2 questions. None of them were egregious errors though, just simple ones like picking Green Level instead of Greensboro. Notably, it was participant 3 with Calibri who missed 1, and participant 5 with Comic Sans who missed 2. Story 5 with a 1-hour gap resulted in all but 1 participant missing at least 1, with 2 participants missing 2. Notably, the participant who didn't miss a single one was participant 1, who had the Heitenschweiler, with the 2 most missed this round were Comic Sans and Times New Roman, and the 2 who missed 1 being Calibri and Monotype Corsiva. After speaking with the participants once they finished testing, they said that as they read more stories, the answers started to sometimes get meshed together. However, the ones with the harder to read fonts said that it felt like it was easier to remember because they had to reread the story several times to fully understand, while those with the simpler fonts would read through and confidently hand the paper in, to only sometimes forget the details seconds later. Though, all the participants agreed that Comic Sans wasn't very effective, and it was easy to read contrary to what I thought.